Good morning. I have two wonderful guests. I've got Olivia Rogers. She is with VNA Palliative Care and Hospice, and so excited we're talking about palliative care today. I also have Jeanna Weaver, who is with Centric Home Health and Hospice, and we want to start just talking about remembering 9/11 and those we lost. What a horrible time for our country. And I just wanted to talk about what we were doing back on 9/11. And I remember it was my 40th birthday party. It was a surprise breakfast. And about 12 women, we all got together for my birthday, and we all got calls on our cell phones on what was going on. And it was, I just remember that moment, just you felt so helpless, you know. I know with COVID, things that are going on with COVID, we feel helpless. We do the best we can, but we're going through something similar. But tell me, where were you, Olivia, on 9/11?
I was actually in my condo at the time. We lived in Virginia,
Mm.
and I was 9 months pregnant. So I remember having the thought of what kind of world am I bringing this baby into? Because we didn't know at the time what was going to happen, when it was going to stop. We kept waiting for more flights. I don't know if you remember how that felt, waiting to see what's coming next. And so I sort of mark the years by the how old she is where we are, and next year's 20 years, which is
Yeah, that's
impossible.
crazy.
It's hard to believe.
What about you, Gina?
I was walking off the softball field going into the high school, and they got everybody in the building, and it was such a weird feeling having, here 500 students and they're scared. And, because I lived in Oklahoma with the bombing the first time. So it was that kind of feeling again, as here I was not a kid anymore. I was an adult, but I was like, oh my gosh, what's going on? So yeah, that was such a strange all around for everybody. I think it was
Well,
just
and
a
our
crisis.
thoughts and prayers to those families, and
right.
just it is a hard thing to think about and remember. So we're talking though today about palliative care, and VNA Hospice has a palliative care program, one of about 75 in the country. It's a pilot program, and so we're going to talk today about palliative care. What is the difference between palliative care and hospice? How do you qualify? How can you get more information? So we're going to walk through the palliative journey. So
Great.
tell us, let's start by talking about how was VNA selected with this pilot program?
Right. So we started looking at the pilot and applying for it in around 2014. So it's been quite some time now. At the time, the word palliative was sort of still this nebulous. No one really knows what that means. I think that's still the case for a lot of people, but we sort of didn't know what we were getting into. We thought this will be great. Our goal at the time was, well, if we can get people the type of care that we provide on hospice earlier, that would benefit them. Even if they don't want hospice, they're not interested in hospice, they're not ready for hospice. Didn't mean that they didn't need symptom management, they didn't need the services of a social worker and chaplain. And so we were really interested to see how that unfolded, and it has unfolded better than we could have ever anticipated.
Well, my brother is a special ed teacher, and I'm going to start with this question, and just because I love the feel good part. Yeah, I think that's what no one wants to talk about the bad parts of, hospice or palliative or anything like that, because you want that feel good. And when in palliative and hospice, I know people think of death, but there's so much of that, seeing people get the dignity and respect they get all the way through. And what people don't understand is palliative begins at diagnosis.
Right.
So it doesn't start at hospice. Palliative can start with a kid being diagnosed with autism and getting the community involved. And so when you look at your palliative program and your hospice, can you tell me success stories that didn't end up with hospice and success stories with palliative that did end with hospice?
Sure. So I can use COVID as an example.
Yeah.
We have had patients who were referred to us for hospice, let's say, with COVID, who recovered.
Yes.
And they graduated from the program and
Yeah.
came off, which is obviously a huge success story.
Yes.
When you have someone who's elderly already and then gets COVID, obviously it's very scary and traumatic for the family. We always discuss at VNA, and I'm sure you're the same, that no one should die from COVID.
That's right. Yeah.
Even though people are hospice appropriate or they have other comorbidities, that's not something people should die from. So
Exactly.
it's always a success story, and we've had the same thing with
Yeah.
palliative.
Yeah.
People who've been referred to our palliative program who don't need us anymore.
Yes.
They either lately have recovered from COVID entirely,
Yeah.
or they have done far better than was ever determined by their physician. You know, they may have been given a prognosis of 6 months or less,
Mhm.
but they far exceed that.
Yes.
Of course,
Yeah.
you know, there's patients who've lived for years past their prognosis.
Yes.
So the success story always is when someone comes off of hospice
Yeah.
or palliative
Yeah.
because they're doing so well.
Yes.
So we do see that. And then in terms of our palliative patients who sort of have used palliative as a gap, kind of to bridge the gap between they have a terminal prognosis.
Yes.
There's no further treatment offered. However, they're holding out hope for that one experimental treatment. They want to go to MD Anderson to pursue some
Yeah.
treatment. If that can happen for them and they can come off of our program, that's a win for everybody. So we want to provide in palliative, as you know, we want to provide the services that they need to live their best life with symptom management, with the support of an interdisciplinary team, regardless of what the outcome is. They may go to hospice, they may not.
Yeah.
But everyone deserves to have quality of life in the meantime.
Yeah, and that's what I think, and I think you would agree with me that people sometimes don't even realize they're providing their family palliative care personally.
Right.
They think that I'm like, you are a caregiver, and you
Yeah.
are bringing joy to that family, and you are seeking every way you can to find comfort for them. That's palliative.
Right.
You are a team. I always say, like, think of palliative as a team. Like, we're all fighting to just give them respect, dignity, and less pain.
And those families are the advocate.
Yes.
And I always tell families who say, I'm not trying to be difficult. And I always say, it is your job to be difficult.
That's right. Exactly.
You are the advocate for your loved one. If you don't feel that their pain is well controlled, if you don't feel that these medications are working, if you feel that they're working a little too well and they're too sedated, your job as the family is to advocate for your loved one.
Exactly.
And then our job as the medical team is to come in and join you as a family. But what I love about hospice and palliative that sets it apart, I think, from some other types of medicine is the family and patient is really the driver for the plan of care. We don't come in and tell you this is what we're going to do. We say, what are your goals?
Yeah.
Then how can we support you?
Yes.
So let me ask you this. So with palliative, and I know with hospice, and I have such a love for hospice.
Yes.
As you know, I was a hospice nurse for many years. So for palliative care, can your palliative patients benefit from music therapy and social workers and chaplains just as they can with the hospice benefit? Can you explain that?
Sure. So one of the huge benefits to the Medicare pilot program is that they built the pilot program around the principles of hospice. So the Medicare regulations for hospice that say that you must have a chaplain, a social worker, aides, volunteers, the hospice physician, nursing, case management. That is the exact same model that they put forth for the palliative pilot. So it's a very robust program. You're required to follow all the same participation requirements as for hospice. What that does for a patient, even if they never choose hospice, is it gives them a level of care that is really extraordinary, which is why we hope that it becomes a permanent benefit, because even people who aren't ready, may never be ready to choose hospice, they still need that interdisciplinary care in the home because a lot of these people are homebound. They're no longer going to as many appointments and they're starting to go to less and less. They need care in the home.
So have you had any patients that they just don't want to use the hospice word? They're on that palliative, they have that benefit, and they pass as a palliative patient?
Yes, absolutely.
And do you find that that is sometimes an easier transition for the family, even those that are just having such a hard time with the hospice word?
Yeah, the H word is very scary. It feels like you are really making a decision as a family, which of course we all know the disease takes its own course. But as a family, for a lot of people, it really feels that you are making a decision that you're giving up. And so what is beautiful about palliative care, and it's becoming more popular, is that you don't have to give up. Now, we don't see hospice as giving up, of course, and that's my passion too. But for families who just can't tolerate the word, who are just terrified that that's gonna end their life sooner, palliative is sort of that compromise where they can still have all of those benefits. They also get a year's worth of bereavement after someone passes on palliative, even if they never chose hospice.
That's great.
So there's services that extend way beyond a person's passing. And again, of course, some people live much longer than their prognosis, but for those who are truly end stage and may not have long to live, some palliative is better than no palliative, even if they never choose hospice.
Okay. Okay.
And palliative is such a great. People don't. Sometimes people, you're right. They associate so much palliative with hospice, and like I said, they don't realize somebody that's a recent diagnosis at 20 with breast cancer. The minute they're diagnosed, anything that's body, mind, spirit, that is palliative. That is you caring for a patient. So, and when ask questions. And that's what I
Yes.
talked about the other day. Ask questions. Ask questions of your company. What can you do to help the family? There and hospice is there just as much for the caretakers. And that's my next thing. On caregivers, maybe they don't, they need more in-home. Where do you see the benefit for palliative care with caregivers, home care companies coming in also?
But one of the other beautiful things with the palliative program, which is called the Medicare Care Choices model, is that you can have home care and be on palliative care. Whereas like hospice, you have to give up some of your more what they call aggressive treatments, curative therapies. On palliative, you don't have to choose. So you can
Wow.
be
Yeah,
on
that's great.
hospice and have home care doing therapy in your home.
Yes.
We work with the home care to make sure that there's not an overlapping care and that we're not stepping on each other's toes, that the care plan is carried out according to the physician's orders, but you can have both. So you can have chemotherapy and be on palliative. And like you said, one of the things you said that I think is so important is that there are many hospitals, and we're wanting this to become more of more of an accepted concept, is that for certain diagnoses, upon diagnosis, even if it's not a terminal diagnosis,
Yes.
there should be a palliative consult.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
some of the hospitals here do a great job at that because they have such phenomenal in-house palliative teams
yeah.
that can provide symptom management, education, help with advanced directives. There's so many things that need to be done regardless of your prognosis. And then the other thing I'll say, this whole conversation brings up the topic of private care or in-home care from caregivers. Someone who has an illness, a new diagnosis, for example, of Alzheimer's, or someone who has a debilitating condition where they're deteriorating and they need more in-home care. Private care, what I call private care, in-home care, caregiver support becomes extremely important because a lot of times the spouse cannot also be a full-time caregiver.
Avoid that caregiver burnout too.
Right.
And that's what I always take. We need to make sure they're socially and physically and emotionally well too. When we get a family and the wife is, very healthy and we're going into hospice, we always say like, we need to make sure you're well too.
Right.
Because if we don't want the patient also worrying about the spouse. And because that happens a lot, they're not almost worried about themselves, they're worried about their family and how they're suffering. And that's such a great part of palliative is that part of taking that off the patient's shoulders too of, hey, we're caring for your family emotionally too. So
We have one client right now who is on hospice, but there's a family friend caring for this patient, and she refuses to give any pain medicine. Patient has wounds all over her body. It's the saddest thing. And so along with the hospice, we're doing teaching. So what do you say? I mean, we all have those types of situations where people are so afraid of those comfort meds. What do you say to that family? Just your take on that.
Right. I think that one of the things I always say is that, pain medications given in appropriate doses do not cause addiction and they do not hasten death. Barbara Carnes, you probably know, is a wonderful author who writes a lot about end of life. She came out with a new book about morphine. Does morphine hasten death? So I would encourage anybody to get that book. And then her other book, Gone From My Sight, of course, is the Hospice Guidebook and Palliative Care. It's a beautifully written book. She can say it better than I ever could. So I always tell families, check that out because a lot of the myths surrounding pain medication are just not true. And in fact, studies show that people who come on hospice or palliative care tend to live longer
exactly.
than
If
patients.
they have the proper medication.
If they have the proper medication. Pain is not just a physical manifestation of something going wrong. There's a lot of spiritual pain, emotional pain, and that's what I love about hospice and palliative is if someone is in a pain crisis, they don't only need the right meds, they need the interdisciplinary team. Sometimes when you get that chaplain in there, you'll notice that there's, their pain becomes better.
Yes.
Right. It has to be the whole team.
And that's truly what palliative is.
Right,
Is
right.
that entire team, that the comfort. I get all feel good about it just because
do too.
you know how it is. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, I just love when you see someone truly get the respect and the benefits that we see every day in palliative and hospice. And when it's just done so well, it's just
It's beautiful.
yes, it's very.
And what I always think of is, because people always ask you, how do you do this? How could you do hospice or palliative care? How even geriatrics? It's so sad or it's so hard. The reality is we cannot affect what's happening. We cannot change the fact that they've been given this terrible diagnosis, but we absolutely can affect the journey. And that journey for a family, and I'm like you, I get choked up when I think about it. And this is why we're passionate about what we do. That journey, I will never forget my dad's final journey. And he passed away many years ago. But some of my most vivid memories of him are in those last days of his life. And they're precious.
That's right.
We don't get a chance to do it over. It's got to be right the first time. And so you really can rely on that support to help you get through that and it be a meaningful, beautiful experience.
And I call him my boss. He hates when I call him that. Clifford always says, in hospice, you don't get a second chance to do it right. And so that's kind of leads me to my next question. Someone is looking for palliative or someone is looking for hospice. I always tell people, ask someone that went through the process. Like you, okay, what company did you use? Where did you find what they did? Would you use them again? People don't go around wearing a shirt that my dad was on hospice.
Right.
But I feel if you take the time and ask and say, hey, have you ever experienced hospice? Somebody's like, oh, yes. Oh, let me tell you. And sometimes it'll be a great story. And sometimes it'll be a bad story. But when people are looking, say they're not in Texas, we're based in Texas, Oklahoma. If somebody was in, say, Virginia, how would you tell them, hey, I'm looking for palliative or hospice for my dad. What do I do? Where do I find that right fit for me? What do you suggest?
People actually call us all the time, as you know, and ask that question. And what I always direct them to are a couple places. NHPCO, which is the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. They have members that they list. And then also the state usually has organizations for hospice, and they can help you with members. And then I would always say to interview 2 or 3. Sometimes it's just a match. It's just an emotional connection that you feel that's going to be very important. It's very important to trust a healthcare team with whom you feel no connection. So it's more than just the facts of what can they provide. There's also a connection there. These people are in your home.
Yes.
And sometimes they're in your home daily.
Yes.
It's not uncommon at all for our aides to be in the home daily taking care of someone. It's not uncommon for the nurse to have to go daily if there's some symptoms that are occurring. So it's very important to interview a couple companies and then choose the one that feels right to you.
And one of the questions I always recommend asking is, what is your process after hours? I've worked with so many hospices now that I'm private duty, and I've heard hospices say on the other end, we don't provide weekend visits. We can, call us, do this, call me back in 30 minutes if it's not effective. And that is sad, so just a question of what is your weekend? What do we do if something happens over the weekend? What is the wait time? Is it just a phone call? Is it going to be somebody will physically come out? But it's important to ask those questions. Another thing that I learned that Medicare, and I don't know what it is for palliative care, but the routine rate is the pay is $194 a day. So if a nurse comes out, tell the families, was this visit $194 worth $194?
That's a great question.
Because are they checking the meds? Are they making sure you've got,
That's right.
Are they doing that assessment? Are they making sure, spiritual needs are being met? Do they have enough aid visits? Do they have too many aid visits? But I think that is so important is when you do go out, are they addressing all those needs, you know?
That's a wonderful way to put that.
Mhm.
Are they being thorough?
That's right.
When they leave, do you feel whole, that your questions and concerns have been addressed completely? And if you're not happy with your hospice, there is always the option to transfer.
And we've talked about that so much that people think they have to stay with something.
They do. They don't
You
want to
do.
hurt somebody's feelings,
And
you know?
I always tell my families, that is not your
Yeah.
concern. You
No.
take
At all.
care of your loved one, advocate for them. If you're not happy, transfer.
Yeah.
You can transfer to another hospice because, again, you can't get it wrong. You can't get that wrong.
And I would suggest if you love everybody on your hospice team, but you're just not gelling with that chaplain, or your loved one just does not feel great, or it's the social worker, call that company. Hopefully they don't just have one, they should have more, and say, this just isn't working for us. We love everybody else. Could you send out a different chaplain?
Right.
And that may just fix everything or this nurse, my daddy just doesn't feel comfortable with her. Okay, let us get someone else out. Like I said, they get paid every day or we get paid every day for that patient. So Sunday we got paid just the same
right.
as Friday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
So when you call and they say, we can't make it out, hang up and call another company.
Right.
That's what I said. That is not doing the proper care that they deserve, that you deserve, and they've had that.
And that's what they've been saving for. That
Yes.
is that Medicare
Benefit.
benefit. So,
right.
They need to ask questions. And, a lot of times, I'm not friends with every registered nurse I meet. We're not lifelong friends. And I've met a lot over the years. So you want to make sure when somebody is on hospice or palliative care, there is a connection. And not every personality, it doesn't mean the hospice is bad. It just, maybe it's just that one personality. You're right. It can make such a difference in that journey too.
When it comes to palliative, someone is not quite to hospice yet, but they are in that in between. How aggressive do you feel that you guys can be with a patient? Like how aggressive in the caring for them? And because they're not ready for hospice, they're emotionally not ready for hospice, but they still need hospice, but they're not going to go there yet. How aggressive do you feel that you guys could be on that?
It really depends. Like I said, the care plan is really driven by the family.
Mhm.
So a lot of the families who are on palliative but are still seeking aggressive treatment from an oncologist, let's say, they may still have IV fluids 3 times a week and they have to go in for chemo twice a week. They don't want us to come out a lot, and then we'll respect that. But if they need a lot of support, that's when we work to collaborate with their home health agency, their private care agency, and make sure that every hour of the day they've got their needs met.
Okay.
So it really depends on the patient need. We can be as aggressive in the home as they want us to be, but we can also back off.
Okay.
And it ebbs and flows too. There are people who come on and are in an acute crisis. They may be on crisis care for 3 days and then they stabilize and then they really don't. They're like, enough of y'all, we want you out.
You can leave now.
Right, please go. So, and people want their privacy
Yes.
sometimes. More often than not, though, the person they want, is the aide.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Oh, yes.
They
That's
want
right.
their
Yes.
aide who helps with personal care and bathing and those things. That person, they develop the strongest connection.
Yes,
to.
every
Always.
time. Every time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
I always say, I don't think people realize when they're like, I'm just a CNA. Oh, no, you're
No,
not. You most of the
no.
time you're carrying that.
That is the hardest
yes.
job.
Oh,
And they're unsung heroes.
Right.
And we need to do shout outs more often
Yes, yes.
because they are wonderful at what they do. So let me ask you another question. I get asked this a lot. I may recommend hospice or palliative care to one of my private duty patients and try to explain and teach. But there is another rumor that if you go on hospice, you lose your doctor. So can you explain that, Olivia, that how that works with a physician, the hospice physician, the regular primary doctor?
right. So when you sign up for hospice, you sign what's called a notice of election. And on that form, and they're coming out with a new form in October, that very clearly, even more so than the old form, Medicare requires, states that you have chosen, not someone's choosing for you, but you as the patient and family have chosen, and they call it your attending. that's the doctor that you want outside of the hospice doctor. So when you come on hospice or palliative care, you get the hospice's doctor no
Mhm,
matter
yeah.
what.
Mm-hmm.
But you may want, and you may say that's fine. I don't
Mhm.
need another doctor. But going back to the question too about what questions to ask a hospice, I also asked, does the physician come to the home?
That
Yes.
is a
Because
great question.
That's something that sets different hospices apart too, is what if I have a crisis? Can I get the doctor out here? But that aside, the attending physician, as it's called on the notice of election, that's whoever you want. It can be your oncologist, it can be an orthopedist, but it's your doctor that you want, that you have a connection with, that's most closely going to follow you. You know, some people get super attached to these doctors that maybe they're cardiologist that they've known for 20 years. They don't want to lose that coming on hospice. And it's very important for the continuity of care that that doctor is involved. They can choose and specify that doctor on that form, and they can change it anytime during their hospice course. That doctor can follow them all the way through.
And one thing though, that cardiologist may have known this patient for years, and when it gets to that critical time, that doctor it's hard for them
Yes.
to make those medication decisions. And that's where the hospice physician is so beneficial. And your hospice physician is your medical director?
Dr. Nyack.
Dr. Nyack.
Yes,
That's right.
yes.
And you all took care of my mother, and Dr. Nyack was so wonderful. She came out, we had the best experience. And I know with Centric, Dr. Peralta,
Dr. Peralta,
who
yes.
is just a legend in DFW and
Yes,
a
yes.
hospice legend. So I know we are all surrounded. We're fortunate to have wonderful doctors that want the very best for their patients and really understand hospice. We had a patient recently that one of the hospice doctors, it was a smaller hospice, was an OBGYN. And I just thought that was so strange that an OBGYN would be doing hospice. So ask questions about that doctor. You're right. Because you want to have that total experience.
Right.
And you're right on the doctor side. Ask that company, do you have a doctor that's going to, Dr. Peralta likes to meet the family at first. I like that too, because I always say it makes our job so much easier when somebody is right there to eval the home setting or where they are in their process. And so that's a great point. Ask them, can I get a doctor that comes and sees where we are and how we can improve our palliative in the home and what we can do? So that was so right on. And I think a question people don't think to ask.
I think people are becoming more savvy though, and they're asking, Vera can attest to this, they are asking more difficult questions now. They have heard about hospice and palliative. So it's no longer this foreign concept that it was 20 years ago. I remember when they introduced the idea to us for my dad, it really, to me, was foreign. This was more than 20 years ago now. But now people know a little bit more, and they're becoming very savvy. They know their rights. They know, like you said, this is a benefit that I have saved for and paid for. And I do have rights. I think people are more aware of patient rights. So I think that's really beneficial, but it does become even more critical that we have the resources, that we have that physician engagement, because people know what they should be getting. And it's critical that they get it.
Yes.
Like we said, you can't do it over.
We had, I had a daughter, she's in her 20s and her father is in his 80s. So she was a late in life baby, but she called and said, well, my dad has this Medicare replacement, and they know hardly anybody takes it, but he's hospice. Please know that goes away. Your replacement that no one else is taking goes away. You go to Medicare. They don't lose any benefits. So when you see that one that dad chooses and refuses to give away and stuff, when it comes to hospice, that goes away. And it's 100%. There should be no questions asked. So when that's scary, but my dad has this insurance that 2 doctors in the state take. Don't worry. Hospice, we have it. We'll take care of it. We do all that for you. And that scary replacement goes away.
Well, and one other thing, and I know with COVID going on, I'm on the private duty side. So I'm the advocate for the patient on home health or hospice or getting chemo, IVs. What is the deal with supplies? Because with COVID, we have been providing supplementing supplies to a lot of our patients that are on home care, hospice. So what is the protocol when they need supplies? How long does it take to get them? How much can they have? Talk to me about that.
Sure. So it has gotten harder to
Yes.
get even basic supplies because of COVID. Gloves, for example.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, we all know masks, gowns,
Yeah.
and N95 masks, respirator masks are hard to come by right now.
Mhm.
But gloves have become now on back order. This is just recently for us that we found that.
Mhm.
However, your hospice should have a stock room somewhere of sort of a stockpile of supplies. And so we tell our nurses that if they need supplies and it's midnight, you're going to have to go to the office and get them and take them out there
Exactly.
physically, because ordering them at that point will take a few days.
Mhm.
We do send supplies to people's homes. And then, but again, our aides are very instrumental in, make friends with your aide,
Yes.
because they're also going to be your advocate. They're very instrumental in counting supplies when they're out there and saying we're running low.
Yeah, and keeping
And they'll bring
track.
them out.
That's right. And that is, if we get a call on Saturday at 10 that they're completely out of gloves. Well, wait, why did nobody thought to call us during normal business hours?
And if that happened, then someone's going to have to go get them and take
Right,
them out there,
exactly.
because you can't go without. And so that is one of the, I think, the key points of hospice care and palliative care, sort of the same way, that the needs are always, they need them right now.
Yes.
It doesn't matter if it's a small thing to us. Like a lot of times in healthcare as nurses, we think, well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's fine. You can wait, but you
Yeah.
can't. And if it
No.
changes when you're the caregiver as the family,
Mhm.
even as a nurse,
Mhm.
when you're put in that position where you're the family member,
Yes.
you
It's
realize,
a different ballgame.
it's a different
It's a
ballgame, and
totally
you
different
realize,
ballgame.
oh, that's urgent.
Yeah.
And I tell our nurses all the time, if the family thinks it's urgent, it's urgent.
It is.
It's
Mhm.
our, it doesn't matter what we think. They can't wait. They're taking care of their loved one, which is so hard. And if they need a pair of gloves, you better get in the car and take them a
Yeah.
pair of gloves.
And
I
that's what I love about VNA. I mean, you all are Johnny on the spot, and you are
Thank
there,
you.
and it's just so refreshing. You all have been around forever, and you do a wonderful job.
Thank
so I'm sorry,
you.
you were going to
No,
ask
I
a
was just
question.
going to say at the start of care, we call them chucks, but bed pads. Even if you say, well, we don't need those, I tell people, go ahead and get some in your home. When they say, do you need these supplies?
Just say yes.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, I need that, because you're in the process. So at that midnight time when you decide all of a sudden you need it, well, that's paid for, that's provided for you. Oh, wait, we have some in a closet. So those things that you don't think you're going to need at that
Yes.
first start of care. Oh, my dad does not need bed pads. He's just fine. I promise you, you're going to need those in time. And when it comes time, you're going to need them right then
now.
and there.
Mhm.
And so go ahead and elect to get a couple of those things you don't think you quite need.
Even equipment though.
Yes.
That's the
Oxygen,
same
absolutely.
thing. Oxygen.
Right.
Yes. I remember when I was a brand new nurse, we had a patient, it was not mine, but a patient who was having breathing difficulty, and they didn't think to get oxygen out. And I will never forget, it was storming and it was hours before this patient got the oxygen he needed. But just be proactive. That's the important thing too.
Right.
So how can we, we've got to wrap this up. It's been such great information.
Yes.
How can we get more information about palliative care?
So my suggestion would be to go to, it's called the Centers for Medicare Innovation. So it'll CMS Innovation, CMMI. Google that. And then not only for palliative, you can look at all the pilot programs that Medicare is conducting, which is fascinating
Yes,
to me
yeah.
as a real healthcare nerd. But
Yeah.
for palliative care, if you look up MCCM, which is the Medicare Care Choices model, it will tell you all of the requirements, the care that's provided, and even if you don't have MCCM at your hospice,
Mhm.
that model is available for you to look at, and you could really build a program off of the Medicare Care Choices pilot, which again, we're hoping will become a permanent Medicare benefit,
Yes.
but we don't know yet. And until then, the model is so great and so robust, and they give so much good feedback about how to run a successful palliative program. Any hospice who's interested in starting one should take a look at that, and then you could build from there.
That's awesome.
It is there. And I always say Google sometimes can be your worst nightmare, but when it comes to palliative and hospice, spend that time reading.
Yes.
Don't read the bad stuff. Don't read everything bad. Find the facts. What does it provide? Well, this is what happened to me. Start out with facts. What does it provide? What does it do? And how can my family or my loved one benefit from that? Start there.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jeanna and Olivia. This has been great information. We're going to close. Sunday is Grandparents' Day and Pajamas for Seniors. We've all participated in collecting pajamas for our needy seniors in DFW. I want to show a short clip of a drive we had yesterday. We did a drive-through drop-off pajama drive. We collected over 300 pairs of pajamas. It was a great day, and we're just going to make a difference in these sweet little people's lives this weekend. So thank you and have a blessed day.
This is a beautiful gown.
Stacks on stacks of adult pajamas, with every pair going to a senior in a low-income nursing home in the McKinney and Dallas area.
Thank you so much.
Teresa's House, an assisted living and memory care facility in McKinney, hosted a pajama drive Thursday, collecting dozens in all sizes. Acappella CEO Joe Alch started the nonprofit Pajamas for Seniors years ago after noticing a high demand. Godwin Dixon works closely with Joe in organizing the drive.
There are so many nursing homes on Medicaid, and they cannot afford their own pajamas, so Joe provides those. And so we're happy to help be one of the locations to drop those off.
The nonprofit says 70% of seniors in Texas are on Medicaid, living in nursing homes with close to nothing to their name. These seniors get a $2 a day allowance from state funding, with many skipping out on buying necessities like pajamas. Michelle Campobasso in Business Development for Seniors also helps with the pajama drives.
When they go into social settings like that, they come out of the hospital and they literally have nothing. Sometimes they'll just come in with a gown. And so those pajamas, it just keeps them comfortable. They can feel more relaxed and more at peace and just have something of their own.
A small gift making a big difference. Dixon says he knows just how much of a difference it makes through personal experience.
I started my career out in the late 80s as a nursing home administrator. And I actually ran one of the communities that was a low-income community for seniors, and my heart was there. It was incredible work. It was difficult work, and there were never enough resources. And so if we would have had somebody like Joe Alch helping us out back in those days, that would have made such a difference. And so this is kind of a way of paying it forward, paying it backwards in some, and helping others out with the help that I wish would have been there back when I was a nursing home administrator back in the 80s and 90s.
Everyone who donated Thursday got a goodie bag with coffee and a taco.
We had a bunch of literature in there and just information about all of us and all of our small businesses.
If you missed the pajama drive, you can still donate. Visit pajamasforseniors.org. For Real News, I'm Sarah Macias.